Hey everybody, it's Mallory. I am doing my seminar presentation on change work, valuing decent work in the not-for-profit sector. This is a paper written by the Mowat NFP Research Hub. So just a little introduction. This is seminar presentation number 4. And in this paper, issues of decent work for the not-for-profit sector are highlighted and some key solutions are discussed regarding how the non-for-profit sector can place more value on human resources. I'll also be adding some critiques and notes. And just a little note there, in this paper, the authors use the term NFP, not-for-profit, and I'll be using this terminology in the presentation to maintain continuity. So, some of the learning outcomes. What's this paper all about? This paper explores the concept of decent work and its potential for the not-for-profit sector. And the decent work movement has great potential for the not-for-profit sector. Decent work involves thinking about work as a source of personal dignity, family stability, peace in the community, and democracies that deliver for people, and a mechanism for inclusive economic growth. So, like any issue involving the public, this issue is very intersectional, and therefore any solutions to these challenges must be intersectional as well. So, how has the nature of work changed in recent years? Globalization, technological change, and shifting views about career progression and competitiveness have all contributed to the changing way that organizations operate. As a result, the labor market is increasingly signs of stress. High levels of unemployment and underemployment among young graduates and professionals, an hourglass-shaped labor market with few mid-level jobs, employer-reported skill shortages and mismatches, and a decline of permanent full-time jobs with benefits, and the rise of more precarious forms of employment, temporary jobs, contract, and freelance work. More like the gig economy, basically. Concern about precarious employment and the challenges facing low-income workers has renewed the discussion on supports needed for both employees and employers. So for this paper, this is just a little look into the research process. So the research process for this paper included a review of existing literature, as most do. They used data from the Looking Ahead Leadership Survey, a survey that was conducted by 810 executive directors and senior leaders from across the nonprofit sector. There were a total of 71 participants in the 9 focus groups from various roles and positions in the non-for-profit sector. Participants were asked about the meaning of decent work to them, as well as the perceived challenges and opportunities associated with meeting these ideals in a non-for-profit sector context. Of course, this is only a small glimpse into the non-for-profit worker experience, but the themes brought up work as a great jumping off points for discussion. So, what is decent work? We've been throwing this word around quite a bit. So the concept of decent work was developed by the International Labour Organization and is defined as opportunities for women and men to obtain decent and productive work in conditions of freedom, equity, security, and human dignity. So I just put a little asterisk there because just some of the language, women and men, of course, those are not the only ways to identify, and all types of people work in the non-for-profit sector. So just to clarify that. So what is attractive about the decent work concept is that it links the goals of social protection to employment and economic growth, which is really what we're going for. The premise of decent work is based on the understanding that work is a source of personal dignity, family stability, peace in the community, and economic growth that expands opportunities for productive job development. So in the paper, he outlines 4 pillars of decent work. So first one is promoting jobs and creating an economy that generates opportunities for investment, entrepreneurship, skills development, job creation, and sustainable livelihoods. Guaranteeing rights at work. So all workers need representation, participation, and laws that work for their interests. Extending social protection, so ensuring that workers have safe working conditions, allowing adequate free time and rest, taking into account the family and social values of the worker, providing an adequate compensation in the case of lost or reduced income, and permit access to adequate health care. Promoting social dialogue, strong and independent workers and employers organizations are central to increasing productivity, avoiding disputes at work, in building cohesive societies. So, unions are really great. Taken together, these four pillars encompass a broad range of activities that can be undertaken by government, industries, and employers to promote the rights, health, and well being of individuals. So, what does decent work actually look like? It looks like more employment opportunities, adequate earnings, and productive work, decent working time, combining work, family, and personal life so they're not separate. Stability and security of work is really important. Equal opportunity and treatment in employment, a safe work environment, social security, social dialogue, and workers and employers representation. So that would be through things such as unions. So the value of decent work and the decent work cycle. So the NFP sector usually focuses on things like job security, alleviating poverty, and good working conditions and social policy. But often the non-for-profits themselves aren't able to promote these same goals for their own employees. One of the benefits of a decent work vision is that it offers a holistic approach to the many systemic issues facing non-for-profit organizations, from setting minimum employment standards, tackling issues of workplace culture, to questions of social sector funding, reform, and policy changes that can improve society as a whole. Rather than focusing on areas of weakness in the sector, talking about decent work highlights the choices that people can make about how they structure their organizations, community networks, and policy systems. So the things that all swirl together to make the biggest impact on decent work is the work environment. So providing adequate wages and resources, stability, training, skilled tasks, reasonable job demands, work-life balance, healthy, safe environment, and teamwork and participation. So that's number one. Number two is employment relationships. So high levels of trust, commitment, communication, influence, things like vulnerability, honesty, all very important. The third is quality of work life. So are you satisfied? Do you have the skills you need? And are you an effective employee? And the fourth is enhanced organizational performance. So improved productivity through increased skill use, retention, and morale. How is your time at work? How does it make you feel? So the current state of the non-for-profit sector, there's some challenges and constraints for sure. So a snapshot of the sector shows that there is a need to better understand the current realities facing non-for-profits. There's a lack of comprehensive data about the sector that is needed to inform this conversation. Based on available information, it seems that in some ways the sector is doing well. Workers in the sector feel passionate about their work, and the sector provides workers with meaningful employment that benefits society. However, there are also many symptoms of stress, so concerns of employment stability for both employers and employees, low levels of retirement and benefit coverage, high rates of part-time and contract employment, as you can see from this chart. Pretty much 50% of people that work in nonprofits are not full-time employees, so their jobs are kind of always up on the line. Underinvestment in training and development by organizations, so that's that long-term planning and long-term training, and a poor work-life balance for workers at all levels. So what's the context? Why are we seeing these issues? It can be chalked up to unstable funding, lack of resources available to non-for-profits, underinvestment in long-term strategies, as we just talked about, and just the culture of the sector in general. So as we've seen throughout the years, and in the paper we read for this class, A Short History of Voluntary Sector Government Relations in Canada by Peter R. Elson, the funding for non-for-profits has always been precarious, which leads to increased uncertainty on where money will be coming from next. This causes stress on organizations, and that stress often bleeds out into other areas and leads to decisions to lay off staff or to overwork employees. The culture in non-for-profit environments is often one that values taking work home, staying late at the office, and overworking yourself due to the idea that you are doing good with your work and making it the selfless thing to do. So, where do we go from here? How can we move decent work forward, and what can we do to fix it? So implementing decent work must happen in a broader movement. And it needs to be intersectional, as it intersects with so many different issues. The approach also must be intersectional. Government, funders, and actors from other sectors must all work together on this issue. It can't happen in isolation. Policy changes are a great way to enact these changes, and subsector and sector level changes that can strengthen the not-for-profit sector. And community and network level supports for small organizations should be in place, and best practices for individual organizations should also be considered. So ultimately, decent work highlights the choices that people can make about how organizations and policy systems are structured, and the choices that organizations can make to improve working conditions for employees. It is up to the nonprofit sector itself to decide how it can best advocate for these efforts. So, in conclusion, there's much work to be done in improving the non-for-profit sector, but this work is being discussed and research is being conducted towards what the future will look like. One of the main criticisms that I found with this piece was the focus on concepts and theory, and like they said on the last slide, it's up to the nonprofit sector to decide. But what I was looking for more was a few concrete examples of tangible, actionable items. So, of course, this is a research paper, but in the words of Assata Shakur, theory without practice is just as incomplete as practice without theory. So, as people working in the nonprofit sector and future not-for-profit leaders, we all share the responsibility of ensuring a just and decent work environment for all. So, the discussion questions. Question 1 is, do you think that increasing government support or privatized support would be more effective in supplying a steady, reliable flow of income that is needed to achieve the goals of decent work? Number 2, do you think that full-time employment options are the most viable solution to the issues facing decent work, or do you think that there is a place for contract work in a just system? And the third question is, what do you think that a cultural shift in the non-for-profit sector would look like? How can we effectively change this self-sacrificing culture of non-for-profit work? Yeah, thank you so much.